Do you like sports? Do you like Netflix? Well, you might be in luck because this week we interview a producer on the Netflix golf reality show Full Swing. Patrick De Visscher walks us through everything he does, everything from how do you ask Rory McIlroy, hey, you mind if I hop in your car with a 50-pound camera? To being on premises at the Canadian Open when the news broke that the PGA Tour was going to merge with the LIV Tour. This one is absolutely fascinating. This is Colby Howard Wants Your Job. Like it, subscribe, share it with all your friends. As always, we're learning together. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Colby Howard Wants Your Job, the show where we find out what the heck everyone else does with their day. As always, I'm your host, Colby Howard. Today we have a very special guest. He is a producer on the Full Swing Netflix documentary, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Did you know that?
I didn't, actually.
Incredible. We'll be talking with him about what a producer does. I'm super excited because we see the end result, but we have no idea what goes into it. Patrick De Visscher, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Colby. Sure, by the end of this, you will not want my job. But
And a little background here. We are in the middle of a heat wave in New York City, 91 in the dials, and then in the subway, probably around 120 degrees.
Yeah, definitely up there.
A Turkish bath.
I look the part. I look like I've been, yeah.
Let's start at the end because we all see, we sit down and we watch a documentary. Like, that's cool. And then we move on. We see 10 hours of footage. Mm-hmm. How many hours of footage? Wait, what percent of everything that's shot are we actually seeing?
I don't know the actual number, but I think if you include what we shot, which is probably about 150 hours, maybe 200 hours, and then all the archival footage that was sourced and gathered, I think it's probably close to 800 hours of footage that went into making the 8 to 10 hours of a series.
So you're looking at 1%.
A lot of chiseling is, trimming and chiseling. Yeah.
Interesting. So Full Swing, the golf answer to, I guess, let's start Hard Knocks, All or Nothing, and then Formula One. What's that called?
Drive to Survive.
Drive to Survive. Yeah. Super fascinating. And I, especially with all the LIV stuff, can't wait to talk about that. I would like to start one step before you becoming a producer. Let's read this out loud. Blue Ant Media identified creative talent and projects, both scripted and non-scripted television, to develop and then pitch those projects to streaming platforms, cable channel programmers, and prospective studio and creative partners. It seems like you got things going and got projects perhaps off the ground or put projects together, and then you decided, no, I want to actually do one of the projects. Is that a fair assessment of how this all works?
Definitely. So what you described there, or what you read off my resume, which is a low blow, by the way, a very low blow.
It was LinkedIn. Fair game.
True. That's fair.
You didn't say like fluent in Spanish, and then you're absolutely not fluent in Spanish.
Skills include Microsoft Office Suite. No, I would say, so development is basically what you just said, is like it's putting together all of the elements before any cameras start rolling. So, it's very, very competitive for the last several years in the documentary and nonfiction space.
What does competitive mean?
I think the dawn of streaming meant that, this is probably a conversation for another time, but basically meant that there was an insatiable appetite for consumption of content, and that basically the fastest way to fill that demand is not scripted shows. Actually, in my opinion, I think a lot of people would probably agree, it's nonfiction and documentary, because of the turnaround time is much faster. It's much less expensive to produce. And if you think about it, 10 hours of Drive to Survive or of the Kardashians, whatever it is people watch, it costs a fraction of what it is to make Black Mirror or name your favorite scripted show, The Last of Us. And yet it counts the same. It's the same viewership, same eyeballs. Yeah. So if you're a programmer, which is the people who make the decisions on what to buy basically, and when to air them and how many episodes they're going to have, I think it's a pretty compelling argument to say that, we need a lot of nonfiction content. And that But by competitive now, I mean that everybody got into that space because of how attractive it is. And so pitching a show no longer means just a deck, maybe 2 minutes of tape, which, you film something just to show a proof of concept. It actually means like putting together a lot of pieces before you even start any production. Here's our team, and here's how we're going to do this.
When the idea for Full Swing first came up, I don't know what year that was.
It was a long time before I was involved in the show.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you jump on, and there is the general idea of we're going to follow golfers and hope like hell something interesting comes out. When you go in, it's unscripted. I don't know how much control you have over what happens.
Yeah.
But like, what is your goal? What are you hoping comes out of it at the very end?
Well, that's a great question. I just want to back up to one other thing I probably should have mentioned in terms of how competitive it is. Part of what is required now, like I said, is not just the great creative team behind it, but also how much access you can guarantee to your subjects in the film or the series. So going to the golf series with Full Swing, this show was an idea for probably 5 years, if not more. And the guy who's responsible for that his name is Chad Mumm. He's my boss. He runs Vox Media. He's sort of the godfather of Full Swing, let's call it. And he did a ton of legwork before anything even happened. I mean, you can't just say to HBO or to Netflix, hey, we have a great idea for a show. Wouldn't it be great to follow professional golfers for a season? They'd be like, yeah, so who are we following? And when is, who's letting you film?
Can't just show up.
Exactly. So a lot of that takes time. It takes trust. It's like not just the PGA Tour. It's also the major tournaments that are not run by the PGA Tour. It's 4 different organizations
and
altogether.
And the players
themselves,
right?
Correct. So the players individually have to agree to give you a certain number of access. So it really does take a lot of time. Any documentary you see requires a really high level of trust, and that begets access to who you're following. And it's just that makes it all the more competitive. Everybody wants to do this. So you just have to fight for like who can tell the best story. And then at the end of the day, who comes out with the best access and the most time with that subject.
So your boss, odds are he wasn't alone with the idea of wouldn't it be fun to follow the PGA
For sure.
Tour?
I bet you there were probably a number, maybe like half a dozen other people at a certain point who had the idea that he had. I mean, maybe even I could say I did have that idea when I was like, 22 years old. Right. I was like, oh, this would be cool to do a Hard Knocks of golf. And actually, I think that was initially his idea for it, or his vision for it, was to be like a sort of weekly quick turnaround, like on tour, which, you could argue could work, but it definitely comes with limitations as well.
Yeah, interesting. So you get the PGA to say, yeah, you can go on our courses. You get the majors to say, yeah, you can have access. You get the players. I'm guessing, are you choosing, I think the personality aspect of this, like, I mean, this started all the way back with like Richard of the first Survivor. Like, oh, there's a game within a game here.
Yeah.
Or Tony Siragusa on the first one. He was like, oh, I might become an announcer, so I should ham it up. Like, I think some of these players understand that they're now, like, they are brands. Are you choosing people based on personality, based on how good they are on screen? Like, Tiger Woods isn't he doesn't have the greatest personality, but he's got incredible skill, and that's, obviously, we watched that. How do you think about choosing the players?
Well, I would say as a diehard Tiger super fan, I would argue that he does. There's like he's like a very fascinating person. I'm not saying here like, okay, Tiger Woods is the greatest human ever. I will say he is a very compelling subject because of all the layers of his personality. But to answer your question, I think that the choice behind who gets in the show, it's twofold. It's who's playing the best, because I think at the end of the day, these shows are trying to show what it's like to be the best in your craft. Like Formula One isn't successful, or didn't really. I feel like it was successful, but it wasn't what it became until they had Mercedes and they had Red Bull fully on board, because those are the people that are winning the races. And the same thing for golf is like, if you have, just the midfield PGA Tour players, it's interesting. I actually think as a golf person, it is more interesting to see the guys who aren't at the top all the time. But at the same time, if you're going to make this show successful and appeal to the broadest possible audience, you need the best players in the world to sign on. But then you have like really great personalities as well. Like I think Joel Damon, if anyone's seen the series, but like he's somebody who, is ranked I think, outside the top 100 golfers in the world now. And I think at the time we started filming, that still was maybe barely inside the top 100. But the point is, like, the nature of his approach to golf was so different than a lot of his peers.
Got it.
You know, he was somebody that in a lot of ways related, or people could relate to, who were the sort of an average fun golfer who likes to drink beers on the course. He just happened to be really, really good at golf. And I think another element of it was his caddy, who's one of his best friends from his childhood. That's cool. You know, and so, like, it's basically like this sort of sports movie that you're kind of hoping unfolds. And I think we got super lucky last year where we followed him and he was leading the US Open for 2 days. And it was like, could this guy actually do this? Like, you know, and even he himself was probably like, am I really doing this right now? I think those are the kind of stories where it unfolds in a way where you feel like it couldn't have possibly be scripted any better, you know? So just going back to, like, I think it's a combination of personalities and just by the fact that we're on the ground all the time with these guys. And you can tell, you know, in the locker room, who's making people laugh, who's, you know, making crazy comments or doing things that are just like, wow, that's actually a human being in there. Like, it's those kinds of things.
Well, very rarely, like, if you are the best at what you do, you kind of have to have a screw loose in terms of your ability to focus purely on that. Like, Danny Ricciardo was the star of the Formula One documentaries. He, like, never wins.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously he's one of the top 20 in the world.
No, it's true. He's kind of a very good comparison, actually, to like a Joel Damon type of golfer, actually. So, yeah, people love him, but it's not because of how good he is at racing cars. Right. It's because of
he's in the top 1%. He's just not the 1%.
And Joel Damon, I mean, that's the thing. He keeps that in perspective, too, I think, is like, hey, I may not be Rory McIlroy, the number 1 golfer in the world, or whoever it is, Scotty Scheffler right now, but it's like, he's still freaking good at golf. Like, to be top 100 golfer in the world, you still have to be a very, very good golfer. Like, better than most people could ever even imagine. It's nuts.
And so you said you couldn't even script this. You are sitting down before a season. Do you plan out scenarios? Like, over the next 6 months we're filming, if A happens, we're ready. If B happens, if ZZ happens, how do you think about getting ready for a completely unpredictable set of filming days?
I would say that I think the best way these shows unfold is not by planning and hoping on a result at an event in general. I think that for us, golf is a secondary element. It's a payoff to investment emotionally of a character. By nature of golf, it's probability. You have 150 players every week. I mean, how could you possibly know who's going to win that tournament? I mean, they're all really, really good. And in theory, you know, probably more than half of those guys could win any week. So I think once we learned a little bit more about the sort of ecosystem of professional golf, it helps to identify who are the interesting characters, whose backstory is really interesting. Like guys who, Tony Finau is a great example. Like if you watch his episode, he came from a really, really poor neighborhood in Utah, in Salt Lake City. And like, you know, you see him go back to his house where there's like all these dents in the garage door that are still there, even though someone else lives in the house. That's where his dad set up a mattress for him to hit balls in because it was cheaper than paying for balls at the range. They would go to the driving range just to use the chipping area, which was free. And then they would hit balls in their own garage. So like just stuff like that, you're like, how could you not want to know more about this guy? You know, and whether he wins or loses, I think you can turn somebody's week at a tournament into a win or a loss, even if it's not a win ultimately, like if they didn't get the first place check, whether this guy is like, okay, is he going to make the cut? Is he going to get into the top 10? Like you can in golf, there are victories that are not necessarily the ultimate like first place prize necessarily. I think you can use that as a storytelling mechanism to add stakes to everybody's individual sort of journey.
Is it a fair comparison? Aaron Sorkin, you have to say every word the exact way he wrote it, versus Succession. You're just like, all right, we're going to put like 4 or 5 cameras in the room and we're going to capture reactions and we'll see what happens, but we're going to be ready. We'll capture it if it does happen.
Yeah, I think probably more the latter for sure. I think, you know, there are certain elements of making documentary where you want characters to say something. And I think that's probably generally reserved for the actual interviews that you see. You interview guys usually after a lot of footage of them has been shot. So you want them to speak on things that have happened where there's footage to sort of intercut with what they're telling you in the interview. So, and a lot of times that requires asking them to speak in the present tense. Like for a lot of these types of sports documentaries, the interviews are done in a way that makes you feel like you're actually in the moment with that athlete, even though that may have been filmed weeks or months after whatever.
Got it. And they know that game is going on. Like, this is going to look a lot better if you just talk in this manner.
Yeah, so it's not every time, because I feel like you want them to feel like they're being themselves and they're speaking naturally, but certain times it does really help for a viewer to feel like they're really there.
This is a similar question actually to when I asked Clay, who writes at GQ. Bad journalists will trap you, will try and get a tweet and get you to say something that you will regret forever.
Yeah.
Bad reality TV, it's like on The Bachelorette, it's like emotional terrorism.
Yeah.
You're feeling bad, we're going to bring in an ex-boyfriend. Like, we're just going to nuke you.
It's like Jerry Springer.
Exactly. Yeah. Is there a world where bad documentarians go overboard in terms of trying to manipulate the outcome and push buttons?
For sure. And I'm not just saying this, but that's definitely not our show. But there are certainly examples, and I don't think I could even name one if I wanted to. But like, I think you can just tell sometimes, even as a viewer, most of the time you have to remember your audience is not stupid. They can tell. Honestly, like shows that are on Bravo, like you just described, I think that's a reality TV trope. I think that's like where you need a scene and you need conflict, because that's the only thing that makes people interesting. I think what's great about sports documentaries is that the conflict is inherent. It's trying to win whatever it is. It's trying to be the best. And I don't think you need much, false drama or conflict.
From a highlight perspective, there's like 3 or 4 or maybe 5 shots per hole, per person. One of them could be amazing. So you almost have a lot. If you want to show like a positive swing, you've got a lot to work with. And if you want a negative swing, you got a lot to work with.
We should get you in the edit room. You sound like you know what you're doing here. No, it's true. I love golf for a lot of reasons, but as a storytelling approach, there are so many examples, just little body language things too, that you can really pick up on, even when you watch the TV broadcast. Like, when they go like super slow motion on a guy reaction, he's like rolling his eyes. It's like those little things. And I think golfers can be really expressive. You just have to like hold it there for a minute and see, like, in a sport that moves a little faster, maybe it's not always so easy to see those things unless you really slow it down and whatever. But like, I think with golf, you can use the action of golf as a propulsion or like a continuation of, the story that you're telling about them. They're having a good tournament. Okay, so show that like 4 good shots. Ultimately, like the guy's like having the worst week of his life. You just show like 4 bad golf shots and the reaction, a few of them, and it kind of helps because it's just like, golf is an expressive sport, I think.
And when you're thinking about the access, how is your positioning better or the same or worse than all the TV cameras that are already there?
Yeah. Well, we certainly cannot show golf shots any better than the broadcast, not even close. So anything you see in the show, if it's a golf show, or if it's a golf shot, I should say, most of the time it's probably footage that was sourced and licensed from a broadcast. Our cameras produce beautiful images, but they're not designed to follow a golf ball 300 yards in the air. It's really like a difference in terms of like the lenses and how like they focus on a subject. If you look at a broadcast camera, it's like everything is in focus. The depth of field is very shallow. It's all designed to be like, you can, if your camera's there, the viewer's going to see it. Whereas for us, it's like we want to be able to get really close on someone's eyes or really close on their hands, or just like, capture them in a moment that lets the camera move with them. But it's just a different look. And so you have to remember that that's our strength. Like, our storytelling is not really golf shots. Our storytelling is people who are hitting those golf shots and how they feel about what they're doing, how the people in their lives feel. Anything that like we can do that's not what you see on TV.
Like, let's take Jordan Spieth, who's very good at reacting to bad golf shots.
He is.
He hits it. We watch that as the ball goes through the air. The focus is on the ball, and then it lands. Meanwhile, if you guys just focus on Jordan Spieth, as he watches his golf shot, that is something completely different that we never get to see. So there's no real reason to focus on the golf at that point, right?
For sure. And I mean, not to say that there are moments, like, especially because, like you said, he is so expressive. He's one of the most, like, the person who tells you what he's feeling in the moment is probably the best example is Jordan Spieth. There's probably a few others, but like, and he's just so vocal. So he like, he and his caddy, it's almost like you're watching like a sports psychologist, like talk someone off the ledge every single time he's about to hit a golf shot. I think that the broadcasters have know this as well. So they do have a lot of their cameras on him just for the reactions. But I think that there's also, like I was describing, like there's a difference in terms of the lenses that this show uses and the cameras we're using that make it a little more cinematic, a little more artful.
So pre-production's over.
Mm-hmm.
People are starting to play golf. I don't know what that you're now filming, I guess. Yeah. What are you doing?
Me, personally. So if we're talking about like we get to a tournament, for example.
All right, so you are going to a tournament.
Yeah. Like
okay.
Last week, we were at the British Open, which was at Royal Liverpool.
Amazing.
It was awesome. I mean, I had never been I didn't go to the Open last year. This is my first time actually ever at any of them. Like even I'd never been as a fan. So it was just really cool to be there. Totally different style of golf, totally different environment in terms of the fans and like how, just you can tell you're in another world. It's amazing.
Relative to what? It's a different world.
Just like, the landscape, the way the course is laid out, even just the grass, it's just different. It's everything. Like links golf is a really unique thing. It's like, at least for us it is, because for them, a lot of people over there, that's how they play golf. That's the only thing they know.
When you say links golf, what is the difference between links golf and something else?
Good question. I should probably realize I'm opening up new doors every time I say something, but
I don't watch enough golf.
No,
to
so
know
yeah, it's a
any
good
of
question.
this.
So most of the golf courses you'll see in the United States are known as parkland golf courses, which means a lot of trees along the sides of the fairway. Generally speaking, there can be a lot of elevation change. Doesn't have to be. It's a certain layout as well. Like a lot of times you'll see the ninth hole will be back towards the clubhouse. But in links golf, it is very much a layout where all the first 9 holes are completely away from the golf course. So in most cases, your 10th hole is actually as far away from the clubhouse as you could possibly be. And that's because they would lay out the courses, and a lot of them were seaside or near water. Everything was sort of related to the wind, the direction of the wind a lot of times. It's also like the type of soil is like really sandy with links courses. It's like it's crunchy, and the ball will bounce in weird directions because it's just like, it's not like this like soft carpet where if you look at a lot of beautiful green American fairways, it's actually kind of brown and craggly in the UK, and I just love that. It's just like raw nature, and it just feels different. You play a different kind of game. You keep the ball lower. You're dealing with wind. You just use what's around you. Use your surroundings in a different way. It's really cool.
So you land. You get there for the tournament. What's your move? You land on if it starts on Thursday, you land on a Tuesday.
We landed on Monday. I flew Sunday night, the week before, and landed Monday, tried to take like a 10-minute nap at the hotel, and then got to the course. And basically the first thing you do, we have a showrunner, and we have a couple of people above me that are like, they're like the generals in the, in the base somewhere that are like deciding what we're going to do. I have a crew with me. I have a camera person, I have a sound person, I have a PA, and sometimes they even send like a chaperone and make sure you're like following their rules and whatever. You can't go here, you can't go there. Everything's like by unit. You have your own group, and your group is responsible for maybe it's one character, or you're going to follow a couple different people. And we sort of just make contact. First few days, there's not a huge set agenda. It's just more of like, okay, we need to get shots of everybody because we're kind of establishing the week. We're saying like, here's where we are. We're at the British Open. We're going to follow Ricky Fowler and Justin Thomas and like Wyndham Clark. And the nice thing with us is like we get all the like full credentials to go anywhere we want. Even though I was telling you we had like a chaperone. It was like, telling you where not to go. It's like,
but the gym as well.
Wherever these guys are, you pretty much are allowed to be. Once the tournament's actually being broadcasted is when they actually care, where you are in terms of relation to their broadcast cameras. But
wait a minute, you like a bunch of guys are working out in the gym. You guys, 4 dudes just roll up with a camera and a sound guy and like, hey, can we just watch you squat for a couple minutes?
Yeah, I don't know. Like you've watched the first season. I mean, there's a number of scenes or sequences where guys are working out. It's a little bit funny in theory because, we have a lot of guys on our crew who do UFC or hockey or baseball. And it's like, when you watch a guy in a golf polo, like doing like resistant bands training, you're just like, But I think golf has become a pretty physical. People are in much better shape than they were decades ago. But every tournament has usually they're either in like a trailer setup, like these like big gyms that are, on wheels, or the facility itself has some sort of gym that they all use. And they all have trainers that are there, either provided by the club or a lot of them share a trainer, and they all kind of congregate. Imagine like getting the best possible treatment for your body before you even touch a golf club. So you're just like feeling like the loosest, most limber, and I think it's, there's a lot of wear and tear on these guys playing 72 holes of golf every week.
You mentioned some people you'll get people to talk about in the present tense things that have happened in the past. are you trying to get them on camera? How are they feeling ahead of it? Or do they not want to talk about it? Or they've signed up for this so they know they have to?
That's a good question. I think there's a fine line between, what's fair game and what isn't. I think that with the gym, most guys are pretty comfortable being filmed. It's about respect for guys who either don't want to be in the show, like have explicitly said, no, don't put me in the show, who are in the room or next to them. If that's the case, we'll probably back off. Like, we don't need hundreds of shots of guys working out. I would say they are very comfortable with us by now. And usually it's like a quick nod, like, hey, cool, we get a few shots, like, and then, yeah. And then
Gotcha.
Sometimes we're like, yeah, sorry, do you mind? Like, and like, no problem. Like, we'll step out, we'll do something else. I think the nice thing about so many of these guys all in one place is, you don't live and die by like needing that one thing.
That's true. They're concentrated in one area.
You just go and find, because we have about, every time we go to a tournament, there's probably like 12 guys that we're going to say we need to get something with these guys. And then as the week progresses, whoever of those guys is shaping up to sort of be a story for that week is where you start to focus. But like in the beginning of the week, you're just getting as much, you just do as much coverage as you can. You're sort of peppering.
Just in case.
You're just spraying your camera everywhere and just getting as much as you can just because you don't know what's going to happen, And like, ideally, it's not just them on the sort of golf course property, but like getting them in a car is really great because it's just them. It's quiet. Sometimes they'll talk. You can get like little sound bites of them just talking about how they're feeling, how their week's going. And it doesn't even have to be like an interview. It's just like them reflecting as they're driving. It's a very useful tool, like for, editing standpoint to have that.
The car reflection always seems to have some good nuggets because they're focused on driving. And so it feels like there's like more exposition that happens when you get them like that, as opposed to sitting down, two people in chairs, me staring at you.
Yeah.
Like, it seems a little bit more free flowing.
Yeah, it's definitely more, anything that feels like you're getting that, whether it's exposition or just context, their emotional sort of status in the moment is always better, like as it's happening, rather than doing so in an interview. Like, interviews are great because they do fill in the gaps for the story, but like ideally everything happens. We call verite is like when it's like you're filming right there, then and there, and that's captured.
Doesn't that car, like the same thing when you were on the jet with Spieth? Isn't this crowded? Like, how many people are in this car?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, also these cameras are pretty big.
Right. It's like right here on the guy driving.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it would take a lot of getting used to for me to be filmed that way. And so I give these guys a lot of credit, the ones that have signed on and do it. And, like, that's why it's like, if they want a break, like, you got to give them a break. You got to let them just breathe. It's just the way I think it's a totally normal human thing. We filmed a guy, like, on his first day coming to the British Open, and it was like, he was with his girlfriend and his agent, and the three of them were in the back, and our camera guy's in the front. He's just filming them from, like, the front seat facing backwards. If someone, like, saw that, got on the next car in the lane over from them, they'd be like, what the fuck is going on? But it's like tight quarters sometimes. There is a point at which you can be too pushy, too in their space, and that you have to sort of do the calculation of, like, is this worth it? Because it could blow our chances to get them later in the week if they're winning the tournament, or they're, it's like so what do
you mean blow it?
I don't mean blow it like you're never going to be able to film them again. But like, I think there's a lot of like, you need to know that if this is really useful stuff that we're filming, then great, and get it while you can. But like lingering on a guy for an extra 30 minutes because you're there can sometimes make them exhausted with you filming.
I gave you everything. I don't want to give you anything.
Like, why would I want to do this the next day? Especially, for instance, like if somebody's like nursing an injury, you want to have them and the doctors like talking to them about whatever it is going on, have them getting the treatment, and you don't need that much. And I think it's when you realize that this show you can do a lot with a little, like because there's so much of the year that we're filming and following them, like each week that we're there or whenever, it's like
each moment isn't do or die.
Not. I mean, there are moments where you're like, we got to get this. But like,
how do you know that's a moment?
When Matt Fitzpatrick won the U.S. Open, like the last shot that he hits in the tournament, every camera in the world was following that, but we had cameras on his family, and we wanted that. Like, we needed to be there on his family because their reaction, like, we could tell they were a really close family. His brother was there, his parents were there, and it's like, if you don't have that, then it's not like our show is doing that much more than what you saw on the broadcast. And it's also just like they're they're a great group of characters for us. They're a wonderful family. And, you know, it would be a big missed opportunity to not have like just that, the brother, you know, getting teared up, or like the, you know, the hug between them or whatever. A lot of that stuff, again, like there might be broadcast cameras on there, but it's not necessarily the way we would film it and the way we want it. So it's like that stuff that you have to get. And like being on a family on the 18th hole is more important than being on a family when they're eating lunch hours before, because you just want to be there with a camera. You know what I mean? Like you want to be able to save that time for them when it really counts.
And so they start playing golf. It's Thursday morning.
Yeah.
Where, let's say you're following Ricky Fowler for a couple holes. Where are you standing?
Most tournaments, we are inside the ropes with them, somewhere off to the side. The one thing I know, and you'll notice if you watch any golf on TV, is that the only cameras that are allowed in the fairway are the broadcast cameras. So we can't like be physically in the middle of the fairway with them, but we can be right up on them in the tee boxes. We can't be physically like on them on the fairway or on the green, just because it's a broadcast thing where they don't want us in the shot, but also, you know, we get that footage from the broadcast, so why do we care that much about being there? We're not losing anything. And honestly, like when we go out and film a tournament, we don't have to be on every single hole. Like Ricky Fowler, for example, like we want to get his tee off, we want to get him walking up to the first tee, we want to get him all his warming up and everything, and you know, his caddy and talking to him. Like a lot of times it's really great. Like if you saw the Scotty Scheffler thing when he won the Masters last year, we filmed his caddy sort of giving him a pep talk before. Like that stuff, that's way cooler than what we could film on the golf course. We're not going to get anything better.
Right. And then when you're actually, and I guess this goes for anything, you've got your crew, your gang of bandits.
Yeah.
Are you saying, hey, face shot here?
Yeah.
Hey,
we're on radio. We're on radios. Like here's a good example. At the Masters, a player, you know, he's just finished doing like those kind of post-round interviews, and our camera's on him and his, I believe his agent. And his agent's wife is there, and his agent's wife like hands him a letter and says like, this is for you, like I know it's your big first Masters, big first week, whatever. And then I'm like in the radio telling the camera, get a close shot of that thing as well, because we already got like probably a wide, we got them in the scene, but like make sure before we stop filming them that you get something close up, because you need a context of like if someone says something, if a subject is talking about something, it's always helpful to have like another insert, we call like an insert shot, where it's like that's the physical thing that they're talking about. That's just like one example. What I always tell like our cameras is don't focus on the golf as much. The broadcast cameras will film all the golf. So when Jordan Spieth has hit a golf shot, great, we want to film our character, but then let's keep the camera on Jordan Spieth, because the broadcast is not watching him react. Use our camera to get more of our story where we know there's not going to be anything else on that. You know, that's like stuff where you're like, it's helpful to have the walkie-talkies because you're just like, it's like quiet. And then it's like, you know, just most of the cinematographers are really good that we have. Like they're all really world class. You know, they've probably many of them have won like Emmys and stuff for their work.
So when you say get the check, or sorry, not the check, get the letter, like they know how to get it. You're just saying that's the thing we should get.
Yeah. Operators are very good instinctually, like knowing, like as thinking as an editor, as they're filming, like get different angles of something. You want to be able to look at things from different shots and points of view.
When we hear producer for you, it's almost more like a director.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's
on-the-ground director.
It's kind of like they call that field directing. There's another side of this, which is like making sure your access is there, and that means negotiating a little bit with the people. Like, hey, you know, Rory, can we jump in the car with you when you go back to the range, or when you go to this? Is that cool? And you like, you know, you have to go over there, and the guy might look like he's had the worst day of his life, and you got to be able to like, hey, is it cool if we film? Like that's the kind of thing where you do need to have like be able to read people and like an approach that is non-threatening, but also like, look, we're trying to tell the story. Give us 10 minutes and we'll be out of your hair. You know, that kind of thing. If it's like where it's like really delicate. Other times the guys are totally up for it and they're in a great mood, and it's like easy. You just ask them and like, yeah, cool, come along. That's another side of the producing too, is like make sure the access is happening so that by the time your camera and your sound are ready, like, okay, this is where we're going to be. We're going to start filming. Like ideally you're not doing both of those things at the same time.
So is there a day when, like, what is you doing a bad job day? Or someone in your position, you get back and your boss is like, did you seriously not get that shot? And a great day is, oh my God, I didn't even realize that shot was available and you got it. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Not to go over your worst hits.
No. I mean, I've definitely had a few. I think it's definitely like where you just timing was off. You didn't think of something in advance. You didn't anticipate well enough, and you just flat out missed something. Like, it's like that happened. We weren't there. We didn't film it. Fortunately, I haven't been in a position where I've blown access in terms of being too pushy. And it's not always in your control, but it's still on you to get something and film it.
Live. So you were in Canada?
Yeah.
When this dropped?
I was, yeah.
So you think you are just filming another day.
Yeah.
And
we were actually filming a rookie playing in his first PGA Tour event. His name is Ludwig Aberg. He's a, college player, graduated college this year, but he did so well in his collegiate career that this is the first time this has ever happened. Because he finished number one in the collegiate rankings for, I think it's called PGA Tour U. He was given basically like his PGA Tour card, full status for a year on the PGA Tour. And so it gives you a chance to play every event on the tour that you want. I think with the exception of a few of the designated events, he has to earn more points to do that. But he's basically he's playing in all these high level events as someone who just was in college months ago. So we're filming him.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's why we were there. That's the only reason it was not our usual crew. I had a camera operator I had never worked with, a sound operator I had never worked with. The camera operator was very nice. He's a very talented guy, but just not our usual. It's important to have your people sometimes when there's important stuff. But this was not planned at all. We didn't expect this. And
so then what happens? You get the news that what happens?
As we're driving to get to this, to film with this rookie, I already see the headlines popping up. In fact, a friend of mine who, I didn't even know was a big golf guy sent me the story from, I think it's CNBC. And I was like, that's not true. What was
the headline?
It was Live PGA merger. I was like, that's PGA memes on Instagram, a fake, fake headline. And I kept getting more texts like that. And I was like, wow, that this could be real. And so I'm getting calls and texts from our showrunner, executive producer, the people in the UK who run the Box to Box. And I'm like, dude, you have to get this. You have to get this. And it's you just feel the anxiety building. And I'm like, okay, well, we're with a rookie in the next few hours in the morning. This is, I'm conflicted on what are we supposed to be filming? And also how do you tell a story? There isn't something where you're physically look around. It's not like people are all just going to chat about it for you in front of their cameras.
Right.
It's not like there's going to be a scene to capture necessarily. So it was what are we actually going to be filming? And it's okay, we filmed this rookie kind of walking into this first day as a golfer, as a first day as a professional golfer, and this is happening. So that's actually an amazing perspective. The TV news is on as he's signing into the registration desk. He's putting in his direct deposit information so they can, wire him money when he wins tournaments. And he's doing all those things as the
as
news
the world is changing
in front of him. It's literally one of those welcome to the world kid kind of and we filmed him for a little bit practicing. And then at one point I was with his agent. I was like, dude, I'm really sorry. We were probably supposed to do this for a little bit longer, but you got to go and
go where?
And so it was basically, the hordes of local news are everywhere. The Canadian journalists are standing outside. It's dozens of news cameras. It's you're just trying to capture the frenzy a little bit.
What are you capturing? What frenzy? How many other players are there?
I mean, it's a regular tournament. It was the Canadian Open, so there was a pretty, it wasn't a stacked field, but it was still a number of high level players were there. And then there's word that they're going to have a player meeting with the tour commissioner there. And it went out on Twitter that our cameras were rolling and we were filming that day. But I will say that we were not in the room at that meeting. I went probably 3 times with our crew, giant camera on hand, walking in and they're get the fuck out of here. What are you doing? It's trying to figure out all these little ways we could get something. But in general, it's just reactions to players. It's getting.
So them streaming out the door and trying to pick off anyone you can.
Yeah, basically get people, and not most of them are not gonna say anything. They just didn't want to react because I also think at that point they didn't really know what was going on, and it's hard to speak on something you don't know because it's changing every day. So I think really the only thing that is gonna feel is we were there when it broke, and you can really use the frenzy scene, and a lot of this is we're gonna learn more as it goes. Still very unclear, but as a lot of people are they have a lot of questions out there, a lot of how is this going to look? What's this going to do for me? How's it going to, and that's where you probably need time with these guys to let them absorb it, let them process it. You're not going to, as much as it was amazing that we were there in the room, it was really just about the chaos and the frenzy, and not
Interesting. So thinking about the shot and thinking about what we're going to see, the news is going to break. It's going to look great when a rookie is coming in and signing in. You're going to show the frenzy, and then you might cut to people reacting to it 5 weeks later. And so as long as you got the commotion, that provides the atmosphere around
Hopefully.
everyone else's.
Yeah, I really haven't seen much of the footage except for a little bit, but like I think that it's when you sort of cut it all together and make it, you know, whatever the story is going to be, I think there will be a feeling that like this is big news and it sort of came out of nowhere because it did. I mean, it was essentially leaked.
Well, that's a awesome place to end.
Yeah.
Patrick De Visscher. Patrick
De Visscher.
De Visscher.
Yeah, that's like I feel like that is the way you pronounce it, but it's just like I can't insist people pronounce it.
No American's getting it right. I just got it wrong.
It's okay.
This was awesome. Learned a ton. We now know a little bit more about what Patrick does with his day. Thank you for coming on the show. This has been Colby Howard Wants Your Job. I'm your host, Colby Howard. We will see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.